Hello and welcome to IMHO. Today I'm speaking to Duane Forrester about how AI might be a threat, but not in the way you think. Duane helped to launch Bing Webmaster Tools, and he also helped bring schema.org to life. He spent 25 plus years at the intersection of search, content systems, and digital visibility. He's ex-Yext, he's ex-Microsoft, and Duane was also one of my SEO pioneers. So I'm going to jump straight in and I'm going to ask you, Duane, you've written two books that have centered on how people and now machines find trust and act on content. So how do you think that is changing right now?
Wow. First off, thanks for having me on the show, Shelley. I am excited. And I will tell you this. I think that workflows are changing. I think expectations are changing. Um, if you had the sense that in the past search engines were your friend, because people like me and folks from Google and whatnot would answer questions and try to like give you pointers and direction and whatnot, um, I'm pretty sure that's not going to be happening in our future because these companies, these systems, they're not really about guiding anyone or answering questions. Frankly, they don't need to. If you want to understand how ChatGPT, for example, or Gemini or Claude is handling something, just ask it. And it will generally give you the pinpoint answer on how that system performs the task it's completing. I watched something this morning, a guy that I follow, he was talking about how, have you noticed that when you make typos, when you enter your information in your prompt, the system doesn't care. It still
Mm.
understands what you're saying, and you could just like mash the keypad. One of the core first things that LLMs were employed to do was to figure that out. And if you touch this key, you probably meant that key because that would construct this word. And in the context of that sentence, that makes the most sense. I mean, like that's the reality. So that speed, that kind of, I think of it as not intelligence per se, but like a latent intelligence. It's just kind of in the background, unmessing the messy bits that humans get up to. Um, that's all going to have an impact. I recently wrote about a Microsoft survey that showed the overlay of how AI can do a job versus humans doing that same job. And we all know that there are efficiencies. We know that there is productivity. There's changes happening with those things. And so their point was, if you're in these jobs, you kind of want to figure out how to pivot to something different. If you're in these jobs, then you want to exert more control over the systems by learning them and knowing them because that will make you more valuable. If you're in these jobs, then you're less prone to be impacted because you're more of a strategic thinker and these systems are simply not capable of that. And it was a really interesting exercise to apply that to jobs in the SEO world. And I based on what I'm seeing, based on my thinking and my experience, I don't think that, we're not going to be losing a ton of jobs in the sense that people will simply not be able to work. You will, if you are a writer, for example, you are a content creator, writing long form content like me. You will have to pivot. You will have to do things that are non-traditional. At least it seems that way right now. 5 years, 10 years from now, that'll be the new traditional. You will have to pivot because that work can largely be done. If it's repetitive, it can be done by an AI faster, easier, and cheaper than a human. So we are going to see that change, right? Whether that's bid management, we already see that with, Google and AdMax and these kinds of things. It's a very different world. And look, you should be aware of changes like chunking and the concept of retrievability and, the idea of a vector alignment and entities and knowledge graphs and all of these kind of key phrases that represent this new world of, we keep calling it search. I don't know if it is, but answering questions, this new world. And you really have to pay attention to consumer behavior because you can argue all day long that what we have in ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity is not search. Be careful with that because you may be labeling yourself as, a bit of a Luddite, a bit of an anti-tech person. It may seem that way to some people simply because the reality is if a billion people a day are using something and they're calling it search and they're happy with the answer.
Aside from that, let's have a look at your in your article, SEO's existential threat is AI, but not in the way you think.
Mhm.
You said it's the rise of AI agents and retrieval-based systems that are already transforming how people interact with information, quietly eroding SEO's return on investment. Please tell me, how do you think that agents and not SERPs are the future?
So, this is really a personal thing, and I've been kind of following this since when I worked at Microsoft. I did some early work with Cortana with that program and training it for language recognition. And it's like the most unglamorous work you can do, right? And then at Yext, we were building our own LLM and training it. Again, the most unglamorous work you can do, building the training models and executing on them and validating them, all unsexy stuff. But it builds a really sexy product. And so we find ourselves moving in that direction. Now, companies like ChatGPT or OpenAI and, Anthropic and Google and Microsoft and everybody else, Meta, Amazon, they have the resources and the teams to move in those directions very quickly. Those people are showing up every day working 10, 12-hour days because they love the progress and the product. And what that allows them to do is move into an area. Imagine you're going to talk about, we'll target Sam Altman for this, okay, as the example. You see Sam Altman comes out, he's on a podcast, he's doing an interview with somebody, and he starts talking about agentic AI. Now, before that was a phrase, it was a concept inside OpenAI. And it was something they were working on, but nobody was talking about it. It was a closely held secret because that's how all of these things start, right? It doesn't matter what it is. It would have been this way when Microsoft was building Word and really developing a business suite between Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. So fast forward today, you've got Sam Altman wandering around wishing he could tell people about this cool thing called agentic AI, but of course, they have not made enough progress. It's not reliable enough. It's still, a pie in the sky dream. So you cannot just go out there and start talking about that until you can. And he comes out and he starts talking about this because we are very close to this. Lo and behold, in July, they release this ability. Now, according to the reports that I've seen and watched, it's, middling in its execution and its reliability and it's slow and it's, all of that kind of stuff. OpenAI released the ability for you to give a task to an agent to tell it to go accomplish something and bring you back a result. And that is up and running. Obviously, a lot of testing in the background beforehand. We now, the early adopters, are guinea pigs testing it in the wild and making it, building it, making it more robust. So over the next couple of months, few months, it's going to become even better. So if you, I don't know, want to do some query fan out work, 6 months from now, you're just going to be able to tell the agent that you have specified in your account, go do this work for me. Here are the tools to use. Here's the login for this tool. And while it's gone and doing that work, which may take it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you can be going and doing other work or fetching a coffee or whatever it is you want to do with your time while it does that work for you. We're kind of at that stage where these systems, these AI systems, they are supportive in that way. They help in that way. And I think what happens with agentic AI, there's been a lot of talk lately about the first billion-dollar solopreneur company is going to happen soon because of AI. I've had a number of people contact me and say, "Hey, do you want to team up? I've got this great idea." And I'm like, "Yeah, you and 40 other people. Like you're not unique, right? Like just because ChatGPT told you it's a unique idea doesn't mean it's a unique idea. It means uniquely I will show you, and because there's nobody else looking at it other than you, we'll call that unique." But the fact of the matter is that these systems are going to enable individual consultants to behave much more like a small agency. Because if I can create a process and the process is largely executed by agents, then the 100% of my time that I can devote can be reapportioned to human in the loop analysis. And if these systems even get half of the work done accurately, my job is to take that half and utilize it as the basis for moving forward with the client. But you gotta understand the systems, and these agent AIs, these are going to be ways for us to create virtual players on our team and to send them out and do specific tasks to enable us to define the most valuable use of our time, whatever it happens to be. That valuable use of time for some people may be closing their next client. It may simply be the sales cycle. For other people who maybe lack knowledge and experience, it may actually be executing on what you promised the client. I will take all your content. I will, rewrite it in natural chunks. I will give it back to you so you can publish it. It's more retrievable for LLM crawlers, but still readable by humans. Like it may be that they get jobs doing that, but they don't know how to do that because they haven't done that. So they need the AI to do that, and that agent could be tasked to go do that. And I will tell you this, if you step into the world of agentic AI and you're going down that path, you better have people management skills because you're going to need them. That's the skill set that will prove most valuable to managing agentic AI work. You have to think of them not necessarily as humans, but as systems that need guidance.
You touched on obviously with jobs there. I think it's one area that a lot of people are deeply concerned about in the industry.
Mhm.
In fact, your latest article you wrote about which SEO jobs will reshape, which
Mhm.
SEO jobs AI will reshape and which might disappear, where you talk
Mhm.
about how roles are changing in SEO and how to adapt.
Yeah.
So, which role do you think is the one that will be most in demand moving forward? And do you think which one do you think will be obsolete?
So, it's funny because I think something that's going to be in high demand is also the one that's most likely to be on the disappear list, right? Which is a writer, author, journalist, call it whatever you want. The Microsoft study labels them all as that. I've looked at it from an SEO standpoint and said, these are your SEO content writers. These are your, what I think of as a content creator. When I was, when I was VP of operations for Bruce Clay Inc., the content team was one of the teams that I managed. And so I literally had a team of human beings who were tasked to write content for our clients. That is the current model. And that model is not necessarily going to be sustainable if you think about it as I'm a writer and I get a full-time income. My job, 40 hours a week, is to come in and create content for my clients. That job is going to go away because if I can give OpenAI a role, an agent can write that article for my client. But that leads us to why I think somebody in that role is going to be one of the most in-demand people. Because, yes, if you are truly a writer at heart, then you may lament the fact that those jobs are going away. I just like to write. But if you shift slightly to being the instructor of the writer, the human in the loop, because you've learned the system. You know how to use it as a productivity tool. You know how to get 70% more productivity out of your time by using that tool. Okay. It's like the difference between going from a quill and ink bottle to a Bic roller tip pen. And you can do more than one client per minute. You can tell a dozen agents for a dozen clients to all start, and you can get them all started in less than 2 minutes. And then in about 10 minutes, have all of the output that you now will go in and edit one by one. So, you're not like the client still has to pay for the time, right? Because your expertise is now not thinking it up or researching it, becoming the expert in something. No, 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 no. You've got somebody to do that grunt work for you. What you get is a starting place where you get to say, oh, hold on a second. This is not quite the tone of voice the client wants. I know that they say X, but when we give it to them, they want this change, so we'll make that revision now. I want three examples that are pulled from live web search. So I make sure I ask that because otherwise it pulls from training data. So URLs are old, they're expired, they're 404, all of that. This is what the new role of writer becomes. And so I think that if your full-time job is sitting down writing, that's in jeopardy. But that full-time job has prepared you to probably be the best human in the loop guide that these AI systems will need. So you take that step and say, I can get the writing done. I'm not the writer. So I think at that end in the risk category, there is that, right? The other things we talked about were things like link building and whatnot, but it's in there. I'll be honest, I don't think I know anybody whose full-time job is link building anymore. And maybe that's just because I myself, I have a bias against link building. I worked inside a search engine. Like there's all kinds of bias built up in me on it, so I tend to lean away from that area. And maybe I'm not aware that there's a thriving world of full-time jobs in link building. I don't know. My perception is there is not. However, things like that, they're repetitive tasks, and those are what get farmed out to AI first, or at least should be. And then the opposite end of that scale is, it's easy to say the CMO is safe, right? It's not because they're senior. It's because they're thinking of strategy. They're watching consumer behavior and they're trying to tease out from the consumer behavior, how do we make money from that? How do we align our product to solve a customer's problem? And then that generates more sales. That's the job of the CMO. And then everything else under it, which is building and maintaining the team, running all the groups and making sure everything is on track. It's going to be harder to replace that level of experience because the system doesn't have the experience. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, I think things are going to be changing considerably in the next few years. I think the industry is going to, who's still in it, and yeah, I think quite a few people might have exited over the next few years.
I suspect that we are going to see a lot of change in our industry. And I mean that on two levels. One, on the jobs that are available, the companies that are hiring, the types of jobs that will be hired for. I actually wrote extensively on this. The job description needs to change. You need to change your hiring practices today because the people you're hiring today, in theory, should still be with you in a couple of years. And if they are still with you in a couple of years and you don't hire these new skills today, well, then you better have a training plan to get them there. Because if you hire them today and they're still executing on the old concepts, as we move to hybrid space and we move more away from a traditional search engine and more consumers are just asking a question and accepting whatever answer is there, if you don't have people with skills that align in that area, it's a really big missed opportunity. Like that is huge.
Well, we've obviously been talking for quite a while, so I'm going to just bring it to a close. But I would just say one last comment that I mean, I know obviously you were a pioneer right at the beginning of the industry, and I think what we're going through now is probably something similar, but I think that's probably a conversation for another day. So I'm just going to say it's been brilliant to talk to you, Duane. And before you go, obviously, I just want to say to people, for everybody who wants to read more of the articles that I just mentioned, Duane is writing at Duane Forrester Decodes. Is that on Substack, Duane?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, that's on
subset.
Substack. And you can also find it at all of the articles on SEJ as well. And I know that Duane is also offering consultancy at unboundanswers.com. Is that right, Duane?
Yeah. Yep, that's me.
Great. Well, it's been fantastic to speak to you, Duane, and thank you for your offering your honest, I never know if it's honest or humble opinion, but thank you anyway for your opinion.
Well, Shelley, I appreciate the time. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.